Let's start. Fine. So in the last class, we had been discussing about couple of things, right? And in fact, if I'll try to summarize whatsoever I had been discussing in the last class, as per that, I can say only one thing, that whenever it comes to, the history optional, you have to basically see it very differently. You cannot see it in this way. Okay, there is a content and you need to write the content, right? So if you are having this particular approach, in that case, it's going to be very tough for you to literally, get selected, because the questions are never being, made by me or anybody else, right? The way we are teaching, it's not necessary that the questions are being asked in the same way. And that's how the conceptual understanding of anything is very important. You have to understand everything in multiple dimensions, that you can literally evaluate the nature of the question. You can really, locate the exact, the demand of the question. And as per that, you can answer those questions. That is the basic demand of, this optional. So that's how you need to understand history optional, right? Now, yesterday we have discussed all these kind of things. As I told you, that there are couple of more things, which are needed to understand first, and then we'll enter into the, the main content, or we are going to start with the modern India, right? So as you all know, we are not going to discuss here about the syllabus and all, because I believe that you guys are so sincere that you must be in this particular place, at least after seeing the syllabus. Am I correct? Have you seen the syllabus? Right. So as in the syllabus, you all know that there are two parts, right? There are two papers. And what are these two papers? That is the history optional, right? There are two parts. This is paper 1 and this is paper 2. In paper 1, there are two parts. This is part A and this is part B. In part A, what are the portions which are falling? That is ancient India. In part B, you find medieval India. Here again, there are two parts. This is part A. In part A, it is modern India, and part B, it's not world history, it's modern world. Correct? Have you ever tried to analyze or compare the history optional with the other papers? Other optionals? Have you tried this? What's the difference do you find?
So, पहला paper हमेशा theory based होता है.
Exactly. She is telling something very correct. In rest of the papers, you'll always find that this part is theoretical. On the other hand, this part is more application. Correct? Let's go for PSIR. What do you study in the first part? Western political thoughts. Correct, na? And in the second part, you read about the Indian political system. When you go for public administration, in the first part you study what? The theories of the public administration. In the second part, you read about the Indian administrative system, right? So basically, in most of the papers, you can find that in the first part, it's mostly about what? Theories. In the second part, it is about the application of those theories. Is it applicable as it is in history? No, no. Yes or no? Be very clear about this. Here you cannot find that it is theoretical, right? It's more given to you in a chronological manner, right? So basically, ancient India followed by medieval, then followed by modern, then followed by modern world. But if all the papers have been designed in this way, in that case, I think you all can understand that there must be some sort of difference between paper 1 and paper 2. So please understand that difference between paper 1 and paper 2. So if you have been treating paper 1 and paper 2 both in similar fashion, in that case you are not preparing in a right way. You have to treat paper 1 in a different way and paper 2 in a different way. So the way you have seen that in rest of the papers, like rest of the optional papers, the paper 1 remains quite theoretical. In that case, the application of this or the impact of this to some extent could be noticed even in paper 1 of history optional also. So in paper 1 of history optional, the expectation is slightly different. Correct. So when it comes to paper 2, the expectations are different. In paper 1, the expectations are different. So that's the reason because of what, while understanding paper 1, you have to have a different approach. While going for the paper 2, you have to have a different approach. So you cannot treat both the subject, like both the parts in similar fashion. And this is the reason because of what we are also going to deal with paper 1 differently and paper 2 in a, with a very different perspective. So now when it comes to paper 1, now if it is if we have to understand it with respect to basically certain, let's say, like syllabus, let's say. In that case, we know that in paper 1, there are certain parts which we are supposed to study. So we basically start with the sources, then we go to the Neolithic age or the prehistory, then we go to IBC, then after IBC, the Vedic period, then Mahajanpada period, the Mauryan, the post-Mauryans, the Guptas, post-Guptas, and then it comes to the early medieval period, which is considered to be the phase of transition, what I had been discussing even in the last class also. When you go to the medieval, what do you find? Early medieval, and like after early medieval, you go to the Sultanate period, and then after the Sultanate period, you go to the regional powers such as Vijayanagar, Bahmani, Kashmir, and so on, and then you go to the Mughals, and that's how we are ending the medieval part. So it seems like a chronological study, but then here you have to be very careful of one thing. When it comes to paper 1, you have been studying a longer history. So basically, if it is about paper 1, the history starts, let's say, from IBC only, if we are saying we are starting from IBC, because there is nothing, there's no much information with us as far as the paper, as far as the prehistory is concerned, and that's how, for the safer side, we have been selecting, let's say, or we have been taking this IBC as the first, topic, and from IBC, we're going to which period? The Mughal period, that is roughly around 18th century. So what was the period of IBC? Around 2600 BC. I think everybody is having the clarity of BC, C, AD. Anybody having any doubt? Doubt hai kya? Nahi na. BC matlab, what is the meaning of BC? Before the Christ era. ठीक है? So this is the international calendar that we have been following. It's not necessary that it is universally applied. India is having its own calendar, right? The Roman people are having their own calendar. This is precisely the Roman calendar which is almost all universally accepted, and this is the reason because of what we follow this particular calendar. So basically when I write BC, it means that I'm going towards the negative direction. Suppose this is the scale and this is 1, 1 and 1. So if we go towards the opposite side, then it is being called as BC. If you go towards the positive side, then it is being called as either CE or AD. Now sometimes you are getting confused that what you should write. If you have been writing BCE here, so you can definitely write CE here. And in fact, in the modern history writing, we are mostly writing CE. If you read the early books, in that case, they had been writing AD. But now this pattern has been changed. So since in most of the recent books, they have been writing C, so you can write CE only, right? So this is the BCE and C. So don't get confused. So when you talk about IBC, so that was 2600 BCE. So if you'll see the time zone, what we have been covering here, so how many years are here? So 2600 years on BC, and then 1800 in this particular site. So how much it total becomes? 4,400 years. 4,400 years. Correct? In paper 1, you study the history of 4,400 years. Now, if we'll go to the paper 2, right? If we'll go to the paper 2, in that case, what time frame is being covered by you? So, in case of India, it is considered 18th century as the period for the modernity, right? And from 18th century, you have been going up to let's say for the safer side, we can say 2000. Am I correct? So the history of how many years you have been covering in this particular part? Roughly around 300 years. If you'll go to the, if we'll try to discuss the same thing in the world context or in the European context, in that case, max to max 400 years, right? Because Renaissance is now not anymore part of your syllabus. So Enlightenment is the first chapter from where you start studying the world history. Why? Because Enlightenment is considered to be the reason because of what world, or precisely not world, precisely Europe was transforming into modern, and that's how 16th century is considered to be the right reason. So from 16th century to 21st century, so that becomes roughly around 450 years. So just compare these two periods. When you study paper 1, you have been covering moral roughly. If you're adding the prehistory here, in that case, we have been covering much more larger period. But since prehistory is very vague, and that's why we have been excluding that part, and I'm saying, let's say just 4,400 years are being studied by you. Now, think logically. When you have been studying such a larger period, is it possible for us to understand everything, in a very minute way? When you study modern India, you read the events of every year. What happened in 1919? What happened in 1920? What happened in 1921? But is it possible to cover the ancient and medieval Indian history in the same fashion? No, it's impossible. It is practically not possible, and that's how we do not study this particular part in such a way. So if you have to study the history of 4,400 years, in that case, if I'll be asking this question to you, that what are the topics or what kind of issues are important in in this particular part? What are the issues that they may be very important to us? Issues की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ. किस तरीके के issues? नहीं, हम issues पढ़ते बिल्कुल पढ़ते. किस तरीके के issues हमारे लिए important है? हाँ, ठीक है. ओके, फाइन. ठीक. और कुछ? इनको issues मानेंगे हम. एनीथिंग एल्स? नहीं ना? फाइन. मैं बोलता हूं क्या पढ़ते हैं हम इसमें. यूजुअली वी गो फॉर समथिंग दैट इज कॉल्ड एज ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन. करेक्ट? If we have to study paper 1, in that case we are going to focus mainly on what? Transformations. What are the transformations? The bigger changes, right? But the bigger changes does not indicate towards the revolution, right? We are simply covering the transformation, because it's not necessary that every time the revolutions are bringing the change. The society is changing even normally also, and the new features are coming into the society. So whenever it is about the new features coming into the society, undoubtedly what is the impact of it? You can find certain changes, such as what sort of transformation I'm talking about. If you believe that since beginning they had a proper developed political system, in that case you are wrong. Of course, it was not there. Since beginning, you cannot find that the concept of state was there, the concept of king was there, the concept of bureaucracy was there. They were not present in the society. But then there must be a phase where you can find that the state is coming into appearance. So if state is coming into appearance, so then it is the transformation. A society which was very much tribal in the nature, over the period transforms itself into a state society. So it's a transformation. But then if state has emerged, do you really believe that the state maintained the similar nature throughout the ancient and medieval period? The kind of state Akbar had, the same state even Ashoka had also. No, it is incorrect. Of course, when you compare the state of Ashoka and Akbar, in that case, you can find some substantial differences between the two, and you have to keep a track over them. So when I'm saying state formation, it does not mean that after the origination of state in the Mahajanpada period, the state remained somehow very similar from here to, let's say, Mughal period. That is incorrect. They are evolving. Some new features are coming. The nature of state is changing. So you can't say that state has emerged and that's how we have completed this part. That would be incorrect. Actually, we have to trace that how come the state was evolving, because ultimately we started from a clan-based society, and then in the present times we are having a democratic society. So how come we actually traveled this journey, we crossed this particular journey where from a clan society we finally converted ourselves into a democratic society. So this is one transformation. In the same fashion, we can talk about the other transformations also. Like the economy, as you all know, that when we were nomadic, right? When we were in the prehistory, at that point of time, what sort of economy we had? In our economy, we were hunters, we were gatherers, right? So from that economy to this economy, of course, like, in the Neolithic time, nobody is early in the morning getting up, right? And then like taking bath, having breakfast, and then wearing pants, shirt and belt, and then like, by picking up a leather bag, like, he used to go to the office. Was it like, just imagine the Neolithic people. अभी किसी ने मुझे आपके फाउंडेशन में, मतलब पिछले फाउंडेशन बैच से किसी ने एक मीम शेयर किया था, और उस मीम में था कि नियोलिथिक पीरियड में शादी जो है वो फिक्स हो रही है, ठीक है, एंड देन देयर इज बार्गेनिंग फॉर द डॉरी इज गोइंग ऑन. अजीब सा साउंड करता है ना. So basically, we cannot imagine this kind of life in the Neolithic period. So what is happening here, right? So here you can find the transformations, right? And this transformation is a basic inherent feature of the society. Now this transformation, as I was telling you, could be noticed even in economy also. So from hunting and gathering economy, we have actually come across a long way, and now we are having a very different kind of economy. So again, what is it? It is a transformation. If we'll talk about society, right, do you literally believe that, like, we are living in the same society? Neolithic period में, like, things were very nice, मस्त थी, और यूपीएससी का कोई झंझट ही नहीं है, क्लास की कोई टेंशन ही नहीं है, करेक्ट ना? न्यूलिथिक पीपल में सवेरे आराम से सो के उठ रहे हो, कोई टेंशन नहीं. हाँ, ये टेंशन रहती होगी यार कि अगर वो क्या हंटिंग के लिए जाना है, सो फॉर हंटिंग, लाइक, द बेस्ट पॉसिबल टाइम इज द मॉर्निंग टाइम. Because in the morning time the animals are coming out to drink water and some other things, like, that's the reason. अभी भी आप जंगल सफारी पे जाते हो तो क्या बोला जाता है आपसे कि, like, morning time is the best time because the animals are visible at that point of time. So you go 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because that is the best time to, like, see the animals or the, like, any sort of such things. So basically, like, different tensions were there. So you can find even the transformation in society also. There was a very different kind of society prevailing at that point of time. But then we haven't reached to this particular stage all of a sudden. Rather, the gradual transformations were there. And in the similar fashion, we can talk about the religion also. Initially, there was a very different concept of religion, and the way the religion over the period got consolidated, and then finally we reached to a, like, religion what we are having, like, in the current times. And I think you all understand that what kind of affiliation we do have for the religion right now. And in fact, like, धर्म से कोई मजाक नहीं, ठीक है, बहुत सेंसिबल चीज है भाई. So when it comes to paper 1, please understand the point. Transformation is the most important thing. And that's why you have to catch the transformations. आपको पकड़ना है. And that, like, either you say transformation, you say transition, like, these are various kind of words, like, they can be used by us, but ultimately here you have to keep an eye over these kind of transformations. So in paper 1, like, it is highly conceptual as compared to paper 2, which is highly factual. So in paper 1, if you have been, while writing the answers, if you have been giving so many facts, and then you are expecting to have getting very good marks, that's practically not possible. Honestly, I'm telling. Paper 1, like, you have to show that you do have a better understanding of the concept, and the moment you have conveyed this idea to the evaluator that yes, you are conceptually very sound, and now this concepts must be supported with some amount of facts, because there is no concept without the fact. So facts are definitely needed, but only to a certain extent. It is not needed in such a way that, like, you are giving ample amount of facts and then you are performing very good, like, it's not possible. Here, like, in every question you have to show, like, the concepts. Correct? Well, apart from this, okay, you can, or we can discuss about some other things also, which are very important in case of paper 1. So since we have been covering a bigger tenure, okay, we have been covering a bigger tenure, and in fact, the way I did tell you that this particular period is known for the transformations, and we have to catch those transformations, correct? But while understanding these transformations, there are certain things that you have to keep in mind, okay? When it is about, like, let's say we have been trying to study the ancient India. So when we are trying to understand the ancient India, I have already told you that something which is helping us a lot, that is sources. And there are two types of sources, that's called as archaeological and the literary sources. Now again, understand one thing very carefully. When it comes to Indian history, what do you think? That what sort of sources must have been given more preference while writing the Indian history? Literary or the archaeological? Archaeological. Anybody else? Literary. ये डर के बोल रहे literary. Yeah, Vineet. Literary. Lock कर दे. Can we lock it? How many of you are in the favor of literary sources? And how many of you are in the favor of archaeological sources? डर के क्यों हाथ उठा रहे हैं? बोले ना. कुछ लोग हैं जो किधर भी नहीं है, तो फिर कौन से सोर्सेस पे हिस्ट्री लिखी है? बिना सोर्सेस की तो फिर तो आप सोशल मीडिया वाले हो गए फिर. ओके, यूज तो दोनों ही होंगे. कौन सा ज्यादा है, मैंने ये पूछा है. ऑफ कोर्स इट इज द लिटरेरी सोर्स. इट्स अ वेरी बेसिक थिंग, लाइक यू नो, जस्ट गिव मी अ कॉपी. You found these two things, right? This is text, this is artifact, archaeological stuff. Which one can help you more in writing the history? This one or this one? Of course this one. Or common सी बात है. You need to interpret it, right? Like archaeological sources are never speaking by their own.
But archaeological sources can be more authentic.
I didn't ask that. I didn't say that. What did I say? What had been used more in Indian history writing, right? Of course, they are more authentic. But like if you are finding this, right? So it is never going to happen that in the excavation you found this, it came out and started speaking itself. I was a pen. The Harappans had been using very frequently me. ठीक है? They also had the digital boards, and in this digital board, while using the digital boards, they had been using this kind of thing. In the normal situation, they had been using the markers like this. Well, तब तक marker भी निकल के आ जाएगा जैसे. यहाँ the marker, ठीक है? And I was being used when the digital board was not there. I hope you got the point. Since like you know, archaeological stuff like archaeological like you know findings, they do not speak anything by their own, and that's the reason because of what we have to make them speak. And that is very tough. It's not that easy, right? Whenever the point of interpretation is coming, so in that case it becomes highly subjective also, because you might interpret it in a very different way, and my interpretation would be very different or way different from like you know your interpretation. It's quite possible. But when it comes to the literary sources, like of course there are so many problems. Again,
Can be also be different in literary sources.
exactly the same. I'm coming to that point only. Even the interpretation can be different of the literary sources, but then you have to keep in mind that ultimately the things are written in the literary sources, ठीक है? And in fact, when it comes to interpretation, now only we have started getting into the interpretation. Getting my point? अब बहुत simple सी चीज मैं बता रहा हूँ आपको, ठीक है? So let's say when you have been talking about the status of women, correct ना? So you talked a lot about the status of women, and you said कि okay अभी अच्छा है, अभी बुरा है, etc., etc. But at the end, like you know, you have to accept one point that every interpretation, even the status of women, is based on the literary sources, those which were written by males. So this is a major problem. Of course, the problems are there, but then of course it is easier to write the history. Like let's say you become a researcher, ठीक है? You are going for the PhD. Let's assume, ठीक है? You are not interested. That's a different thing. So when you are becoming a researcher, right? In that case, you just think of yourself. If you have to do research on the basis of literary sources or on the basis of archaeological sources, which one is better for you? Literary आसान है ना आपके लिए. आप थोड़ा practical terms में सोच के देखो. आपने अगर क्या किया, if your work is heavily based on the archaeological sources, it needs so many scientific experiments. आपको लैब भेजना पड़ेगा, वेट करना पड़ेगा उनके फाइंडिंग्स का. और यहाँ इंडिया में तो जरूरी चीजों के लैब टेस्टिंग का रिजल्ट जल्दी आते नहीं है, ठीक है? आपको लग रहा है कि आपके हिस्टोरिकल रिसर्च के लिए वो अगले दिन आपको रिपोर्ट दे देंगे. यू हैव टू वेट अ लॉट, ठीक है? सो यू विल ऑल्सो प्रिफर इंस्टीड ऑफ फिनिशिंग योर PhD in 10 or 15 years to finish your PhD in 5 years. तो बेसिक प्रॉब्लम है यार ये. So that's the reason because of what, when it comes to the uses of sources, which sources have been used more? Like of course it is the literary sources, not the archaeological sources, right? So since sources have been literary sources have been used more for writing the history, so that has created a problem, right? Of course, and since the Sources are not very clear in case of Indian history. Like we have used literary sources more, but the way he was saying, archaeological sources are better sources. Yes, it may be there may be a debate for this, but yes, it is true that at least archaeological sources do not lie. But the literary sources, they definitely lie. Just now I had been giving the example of the status of women. That is the best example for it. That we are bound to write about the status of women, unfortunately on the basis of those sources which were written by the biased males only. So if you have been creating anything on the basis of that, in that case, how much subjective it is that you can understand? Right? So it is a problematic part of Indian history. And this becomes more problematic, right? This becomes more problematic when it is about ancient India. Correct? When you go to modern India, unfortunately the sources are not that problematic. Because when it comes to modern India, you all know that non-cooperation movement took place. You all know that Gandhiji was thrown out of the railway bogie. Pata hai? Now nobody can question, अरे तुमने देखा है फेंका कि नहीं फेंका, नहीं पूछता, ठीक है. Lekin when it comes to the ancient India, we do ask such kind of questions. Such as like there is one group of scholars, they believe that Mahabharata is a real story, it did happen. On the other hand, there are certain scholars like, those who do not believe that Mahabharata is a real story, rather they call it a mythical story. And that's what they do not believe. But then I hope you can understand that this subjectivity must be there in history. Why? Because actually there is nothing as such, like there is no source as such with us through which we can literally prove whether it happened or it did not happen. Correct? So what I'm trying to tell you, that whenever you have been writing anything about ancient India, there is something that is called as subjectivity. And this subjectivity is getting less as we move towards the modern times. Correct? This subjectivity is more in the ancient times. The moment we reach to the medieval India, the subjectivity is getting less, right? The moment you reach to the modern India, at least the subjectivity with respect to the happening or non-happening of the event is not highly subjective. You know that it happened. There might be different interpretation for it, right? Whether in the non-cooperation movement Gandhi was very active or not. Whether in the non-cooperation movement, the peasantry section was very active or not. These kind of questions may be there. But when it comes to ancient India, we are doubting very much the event itself in the ancient times. Correct, na? So please understand what I'm trying to tell you. That the moment we move from the ancient to the modern, our treatment to the subject is changing. Correct? E.H. Carr is writing a very popular story. E.H. Carr, you all must have heard, the person who wrote the book, What is History? Correct? So he's writing about a story. And the story is like this. There were two fellows. Okay? And who are these two fellows? One is Mr. A and one is Mr. B. A is very passionate about smoking and B is very passionate about drinking. एक को सुट्टा मारने का शौक था, एक को दारू पीने का शौक था, अगर लेमैन शब्दों में कहे हम, ठीक है. So now it is an affair of one night, ठीक है. Let's say this is the road which is going, ठीक है. And these are 3 points. Let's say this is X, this is Y, and this is Z, ठीक है. So A, who was very fond of smoking, this person used to live here. So A is living here, ठीक है, and B is living here. And what is this X? So one day B went to attend a party in a place called as X. And he was very fond of drinking. B is very fond of drinking. Smoking बोला था, अच्छा नहीं, B is very fond of drinking. लगाया पार्टी में, थोड़ा ज्यादा टिका लिया उसने, चला रात को घर गाड़ी ड्राइव करते हुए. So when he is going home, at the same time, it was midnight, around 12 or 1 o'clock. This is A, who is very fond of smoking. At the night he realized that he is not left with any more cigarette. So he just thought of buying the cigarette. Correct? So there was a cigarette khoka across the road. So somewhere, in the midnight, sometimes in the, in the night, this person was trying to cross the road, just to buy cigarette. And unfortunately, that person, कौन? B, was crossing the road, uski gaadi hai ye, theek hai, he was crossing the road. And when he was crossing, B was also going through the road, and then the accident happened, and finally the A died. Correct? A died. Now look at this story in 3 different labels. If this particular incident took place in the ancient times, then do you really think that we must be debating on this point, what was the reason for the accident? We must be debating on this particular fact that whether this accident took place or not. Archaeological excavation हुआ, उसमें क्या निकला? Like we found the dead body of A, then B also, right? And then we kept on wondering what might have happened because of what? Like we have been finding the skeletons of A and B. So we are we are emphasizing more on what? The historicity of the events when it is ancient. But when it is modern, right? If this particular accident might have taken place in the modern, in that case, we all must be knowing कि yes, the accident took place. Correct ना? हमको पता होगा ये accident तो हुआ था. क्यों? Because in newspaper the article is there. In the police beat, the case was registered. So that file is also there. So are we going to struggle that, are you going to struggle about the historicity of the events in the modern times? No. Then what must be the issues in the modern times? When we have been reading about this particular event historically, then we must be talking about the reasons because of what this accident took place. And then different people must be giving different kind of logics. एक कहता है कि if A won't be very habituated of smoking cigarette, in that case this accident might not have taken place. रात को क्या जरूरत थी बाहर, इतनी तलब क्या होती है? That's one reason. The second reason कि if this Bevada person would not have drunk this much, in that case the accident must not have taken place. The third person is saying कि no, actually see the construction of road here. It is bending in such a manner that the accident took place. Then another person is saying, look at the light condition. It's so low that B must not have, able to see A. That person is crossing the road. So in the modern times, we'll be discussing about these kind of questions. That is the nature of the subject. Correct, na? So, जब हम ancient पढ़ते हैं, the nature of questions, they are very different. When we read the modern, the nature of questions are very different. So think about the subject in this particular manner that you can really treat them well, the questions, right? When the questions are being asked in ancient, they are having a different mindset while framing the question, and they have a different mindset while framing the questions in the paper too. So this also you have to keep in mind. But then, when it comes to prove the historicity of any particular event in the ancient times, then it is very important. Correct, na? So don't you think while reading the ancient India, there's something which is playing very important role, that is sources. But when we have been reading the modern India, are the sources this much important? No, because we are not struggling with the question of the historicity of that particular event, and that's why the sources are not very important. And that's why when you have been writing answer in paper 2, it's not necessary that you have been giving so much references of the sources. But when you have been writing the answers in paper 1, you have to understand one key demand of the question, that whatsoever you have been writing, try to refer some sources. Why? Because the reference of the sources is proving the historicity of that particular event in a more forcible manner, and that's how it becomes important to us. Correct? So if you have understood this point also, so you must be able to catch this particular thing, that when we have been studying the ancient India and medieval India to some extent, then the things are very different. Sources are very important, right? The historicity of the events are very important. On the other hand, when we have been reading the modern India, at that point of time, things remain very different for us. So please keep in mind these kind of things, and then you study history, that can help you to score higher in the subject. Correct? So this is what, this is all what I wanted to discuss for the subject. Correct? Now there are a few more things, how we are going to proceed. That is also something I would like to tell you. I'll just take 2-3 minutes and I'll finish it. Okay. So of course, we are going to do it in multiple stages. What are these stages? Our foundation course, okay, history optional foundation, we're going to do it multiple stages. What is the first stage? we are just going for the classes. Correct? Now one thing I must tell you, that how do I conduct the class? That's again very important. That in the classes, what I do, I always used to ask, like, to divide your paper into two parts. This is the main part and this is the subsidiary part. Whenever I deal with any particular topic, I do not dictate only, which is mostly being done. Okay, fine. So non-cooperation movement, or let's say IVC. So anybody is discussing it for 10-15 minutes and then the dictation starts. I always try to make you understand that what are the dimensions. I always believe in unfolding the dimensions, that how many dimensions are possible, how many dimensions we can open up for this particular topic. We just open it up and write, and first we try to understand it conceptually. So when I have been discussing about the topic, so whatsoever you find important, you can write it as per your own convenience. Correct? And after that, there are certain issues, like, which are dictated by me in this particular part in certain point format. Okay, like, this and this. Right? Correct? So this is how we conduct the classes. But we do not rely on any PPT. We do not rely on any sort of notes. Okay, I gave you the notes and that's it. Like, I always try to make the notes within the class. So since there are 4 parts, so we'll be ultimately developing 4 booklets. One for ancient, one for medieval, one for world history. And that's how 4 booklets should be there. And these 4 booklets should be the whatsoever you say, Gita, Ramayana, Quran, Mahabharata, aapko jo acha lagta hai wo bol lijiye. So it's about that. Okay. Now, along with the classes, like, in the classes, whatsoever is needed, I try to focus on that. Concept hai, content hai, historiography hai, that I try to discuss, everything here only. Now, after the classes, or let's say along with the classes, there's something which is important, that is answer writing. What people never prefer to write. The moment I am saying कि जो है 3 दिन के बाद एक टेस्ट है, क्लास गायब. But one thing, you understand it, please, categorically, that ultimately you have been getting all the marks on the basis of what you write on the paper. Correct? Whether you have come to my classes or not, whether you have studied the subject by your own, whatsoever you have done hardly matters. At the end, what matters, that what exactly you have written on the paper. And if you believe that you are so much talented person that only in the day of examination you are getting into the examination hall and you started writing, और वो कहते हैं ना आग वाग निकलना शुरू हो जाती है, वैसा फायर लग जाएगा, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता, वो सिर्फ फिल्मों में होता है. नथिंग इज गोइंग टू हैपन. जब इंसान फिल्मों में हीरो की एंट्री होती है तो वो इधर कोई गिर रहा है, उधर कोई गिर रहा है, हवाएं चलने लगती है, तूफान आने लगता है. एग्जामिनेशन हॉल में ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता. अल्टीमेटली यू विल बी फेसिंग प्रॉब्लम इफ यू डू नॉट हैव, और if you haven't done proper answer writing practice. Correct? So answer writing practice is very important, and that's why on regular basis I give the questions. Now it is up to you that whether you write it or not. But if you're writing it, that is good for you. That also you need to keep in mind. Okay? Of course, the third thing is basically what? The map. So this time we are changing our map material altogether. Now we are coming up with the digital notes of the map section. Now what are these digital notes of the map section? Like maybe tomorrow I'll upload one video and the things would be very clear. But roughly I'm telling you that what are these digital maps. First of all, I have taken the Google map now. Earlier we used to locate the site with the help of manually. We used to do it manually. स्केल लेके चश्मा लगा के वो नापते रहते थे, इधर से इतना इंच, इधर से इतना इंच, वैसे ही करते थे. But then I hope you can understand कि the location cannot be perfect ever if you have been doing it in this way. And that's how finally I took the help of a software engineer, and then we have now locating it scientifically. Google Map के तरह. ठीक है? अब आप बोलेंगे कि पुराने sites कैसे ढूंढेंगे आप Google Map? Of course we can find the modern day districts, right? So what am I doing? If the sites are there in the Google map, fair enough. If they are not present, in that case we are taking the modern day district of that particular site and we are finding the site, and that's how we are locating it. So the location is very much perfect. And then like, along with the locations, like if it is the map, let's say this is the map, like this is the let's say this is India and this is the site. Sites are blank. There's nothing. Only like let's say this is one map for the Neolithic. There are 6 sites or 7 sites which are there on the map and nothing is there. And now it is up to you that you have to find out that what site it is. Okay? And the moment you let's say you find that this is Dhaulabira. Okay? And the moment you thought of it is Dhaulabira, you take the cursor over here. आप जैसे cursor वहाँ पे लेके जाएंगे, the pop-up will be there, and in that pop-up, all the information of the site would be there. And if your your guess was incorrect, then also you'll be able to figure it out. Your guess was incorrect. So now this is such a material which is not only accurate, but at the same time, it is helping you to practice also, because nothing is there on the map. Initially, when you are opening it, it is completely blank. When you are taking the cursor to that particular point, then only the informations are coming. So I think that can help you in regular practice also, right? आप रोज 10 मिनट दीजिए, 5 मिनट दीजिए, and keep on practicing on these maps, and by the end of the year you'll be veteran in the maps. It's not the Google, same map is there. जैसा UPSC, exactly same. The Tropic of Cancer is there. The state boundaries are there. Exactly the same map. But I have taken, we have taken, not I have taken, because मुझे तो ये सब आता नहीं है. ठीक है? We have taken it from the Google map only. So you can, it is a Google map. You can extend it to any scale. आप छोटा कर सकते हैं, बड़ा कर सकते हैं, आप कुछ भी कर सकते हैं इसको. ठीक है? तो गूगल मैप है, वो है पूरी इंडिया में वो साइट, पूरी दुनिया में साइट देखना है कि पूरी दुनिया की अगर पिक्चर आ रही है तो साइट कहाँ पे आएगा, तब भी दिखेगा आपको. आप बड़ा करेंगे तो वो भी दिखेगा आपको. आप एग्जैक्टली उसको यूपीएससी वाले फॉर्मेट में लेके जाना चाहेंगे तो उतने भी उस फॉर्मेट में भी है, और एग्जैक्टली आपका जो पहली विजिबिलिटी होगी उसी फॉर्मेट में होगी वो. ठीक है, हमने उसी फॉर्मेट में रखा है कि द ब्लैंक मैप, स्टेट बाउंड्रीज एंड ट्रॉपिक ऑफ कैंसर, दैट्स इट. और कुछ है नहीं इसमें. ठीक है. So this is the digital map for the notes what we are going to provide. That is one thing. Fourth, I can say now I have added a new thing here, and what is that? That is about basically the advanced course. Advanced course. Now this advanced course is going to be part of your course only, right? So if somebody finds that it is important for you to go for one more revision, so we'll be launching this advanced course twice in a year. So whenever you are comfortable, let's say first of all you have to go for the foundation. After doing the foundation, if you want to revise it in a quick in a time period, in that case this is open to you, and you can come, you can join those classes. And here we have been covering everything with respect to one page, one thing, crisp notes on all the topics. The notes will be digital. Okay. Again, if you log in your portal, you'll find these notes. So the notes will be there, and in one page, the whole theme is there, and you can revise it from there, right? That support is also going to be provided by you. That is how we are going to finish our foundation. So foundation does not mean कि जो है once you have your foundation is done, and उसके बाद भैया राम राम आप कौन मैं कौन खामखा वाली बात हो जाएगी. फिर नहीं, ऐसा नहीं होने वाला. हम ये करने वाले हैं. ठीक है. तो ये भी दिस इज पार्ट ऑफ योर फाउंडेशन. सो नाउ द बेस्ट टाइम फॉर योर ये एडवांस वुड बी द नेक्स्ट ईयर ओनली, when you are literally planning to write the means, because next year you all must be planning to write or giving the pre. So after giving the pre, if you believe that you need a quick revision, in that case you can come for that course, you can go for a quick revision, and you can find some short crisp material also on that. Okay. So it's better to do it in this way. Okay. So these are few things that you need to keep in mind, जिसको हम कई stages में हमने करते हैं. And one more thing that we are going to cover, the 15 years of the PYQ questions also, and we will keep on discussing about the PYQs also. That's also part of it. So this is how we are going to cover our whole syllabus. That is the format of it. That's it. और मेरे पास कहने के लिए कुछ नहीं है, बस बहुत हो गया.
Sir, why are we not doing one page, one thing? Lectures के साथ.
Lectures के साथ आप कंफ्यूज हो जाएंगे. एक तो what is the utility of this one page, one thing? It's giving you the revision also. And if there's something new which has to be added, right? If it is added, because I'm always adding the new historians, the new historiography, the new books, I keep on adding these kind of things, you'll find that access also. That's why I'll be doing it there. Okay? and it's not going to consume more than 30-35 days. Okay, and the revision will be done during that particular period only. Correct? Okay, so that's all about these kind of things what I wanted to do with you initially, and now we are going to start the syllabus. So I think you have clarity that we are going to start with the modern India, right? So let's start with the first topic of modern India. Correct? We are going to study modern India, right? First question, what is India? That you all must be knowing, na? Malum hai na? So, okay, fine. I believe that you all know the meaning of this. Now, let you guys tell me the meaning of this modern. पहले तो उधर से शुरुआत होगी. Tell me the meaning of modern.
So it means the modern political system, the modern economic and social system, the modern systems that are coming.
What is modern?
Sir,
Are you modern or not?
yes.
You are modern. So do you really want to say that I am a medievalist?
It's different from the past. It's radically different from
Radically from different, or wait a second. Traditional to? So in ancient India, people were not scientific. Who was Charak? Who was Aryabhatta? They were very scientific. Yes, Urvi. New ideas, very nice. Very nice. Anything else? Modern, क्या स्पेशलाइजेशन है? मास्टर्स तो नहीं किया ना, अभी तो ग्रेजुएशन है. अरे क्या बात है, बढ़िया यार. बहुत सिंपल से मतलब है. जीन्स मतलब मॉडर्न, फटी हुई जीन्स मतलब पोस्ट मॉडर्न. एज सिंपल एज दैट. Unfortunately, we define the modernity on the basis of very wrong things. Suppose if somebody is wearing a jeans and t-shirt, then he is a modern. If somebody is wearing sari or dhoti, then we call him or her as classical, not modern. Correct ना? क्या classic look है? But we never say कि कितनी modern लड़की है, कितना modern लड़का है, नहीं कहते. So unfortunately, it is being decided on the basis of these kind of wrong parameters. Modernity is not really about these kind of things. Honestly, I am telling you, modernity is a very different thing. What is modernity? For that, I'll tell you a story that can help you to understand. And this story was told to be by my teacher, when I was in masters. So stories like this, there is a girl or there is a fellow called as X, right? And X is a quite learned fellow. He is doing a government job. And X is having a daughter, Y. Okay? And X is basically a Brahmin fellow. Okay? Of course, Y is also Brahmin. It's तो ऐसे ही होता है. Birth-based system. Now, X, was a very modern fellow, right? So this person got her daughter educated properly. And after completing her graduation, this girl is clearing UPSC. She got selected in UPSC. She got very good rank also. She got IAS. She went to academy. And as it happens, in academy, people are normally developing relationship with others, right? So Y is falling in love with another fellow called as Z. But unfortunately, Z is a lower caste fellow. Correct? Now, after, the training is over, Y is approaching to her father X and asking for the marriage with Z. The X agrees in a moment. Yes, fine, you got married, there's no problem. But then there is a condition. And what is that condition? That the marriage would take place as per our own custom, other practices. Now you tell me, X is a modern fellow or not? She says yes. You don't know. नहीं है. Okay. नहीं है. कॉम्प्लिकेटेड। तो आसान सवाल थोड़ी यूपीएससी पूछती है, आपको क्या लगता है? ही इज देयर लाइक ही इज लाइक ए मॉडर्न पर्सन? यस, नो, है, सब्जेक्टिव है, ओके फाइन। वेल, इतना भी सब्जेक्टिव नहीं है, ठीक है। एक्स इज अनडाउटेडली ए मॉडर्न फेलो। व्हाई? बिकॉज इन हिज थिंकिंग दैट पर्सन इज वेरी rational. Correct? In his thinking, that person is very rational. Why? Because he believes in the girl's education. That's how he gave proper education to his girl. Then if his daughter is willing to get married with a boy who is not from his own caste, like he is also agreeing that. But then this person is having some infatuation for our culture. That's quite okay. So here, if we'll compare these things, in that case, you'll find that that person is very rational. So what is the indicator of modernity? Is the rationalism. The only term which defines modernity is what? The rational. If any person, by wearing dhoti and kurta and by having tika, if that person from thinking or by his thinking is a rational person, in that case we can call him a modern person. It's not necessary that whether this person is speaking English or not, that is not going to decide that person is modern person. Usually क्या होता है, हिंदी फिल्मों में खूब दिखाते हैं ना, एक लेडी है बड़ी अच्छे कपड़े नहीं पहनती, जीन्स नहीं पहनती, साड़ी पहनती, हमेशा गजरा लगाती है, तो उसी से क्या इमेज बना लिया जाता है कि वो लड़की क्या है, ट्रेडिशनल है. But the moment the girl starts speaking English, that perception is being conveyed कि no, that girl is modern. I don't know, you guys must not be watching those kind of films. Like, there was a film of Anil Kapoor, Bulandi. So there are two brothers. They look very similar. The elder brother is also Anil Kapoor. The younger brother is also Anil Kapoor. So the younger one, was going to the city for studying, and there, he was falling in love with a girl that's called Ravina Tandon. And then both of them are getting married. And then Ravina Tandon is coming to this place. And the elder Anil Kapoor is married to Rekha. So she is a very traditional woman. She is doing all these household works. So Ravina Tandon believes that she is a traditional girl, outdated woman. So she keeps on insulting her. But one day, Rekha is getting angry and started speaking English for 2 minutes consecutively. And when she spoke English for 2 consecutive minutes, and then this perception was conveyed that this is a very modern girl. This is not the indicator of modernity. Modernity, if from the thinking you are a rational person, in that case you are modern. So when we have been calling any particular period as the modern period, it means what is the biggest indicator of the modernity is the rationalism. If that period is rational, in that case it is a modern period. So as you all know that Indian or any history, right, is always divided into 3 parts, right? And what are these 3 parts? This is ancient, then it is medieval, and then modern. So why do we divide the times in such a manner? Because there are certain changes. Changes in what? There are certain changes in the society. And on the basis of these changes, we call the periods as ancient, medieval, modern. So when it comes to the transition from ancient to medieval, I hope you all must have heard of this particular institution that's called as feudalism. So with the coming of feudalism, we say that the society has entered from ancient to medieval. In the same way, when society, is becoming rational, then we say that the society has transformed from medieval to modern. Correct? Now the point is that what are the parameters for these modernity? What are the parameters for this modernity? So we can evaluate it on the basis of the various aspects of society. What is the first aspect of society? That is polity. Now what kind of polity can be considered as a rational, as a modern polity? Democracy. Okay. And what is the core feature of democracy? Very nice. ठीक है. It's known as rule of law. Now what is this rule of law? In the medieval times there was nothing as such rule of law. Though there was like some sort of sariyat and all was being followed, but yet the wish of the ruler was law. अब औरंगजेब को इसकी शकल पसंद नहीं आई, इसकी बोला इसको हाथी के पैर के नीचे कुचलवा दो. So whether the instruction has to be followed or not, is it possible in the present time? Why? Because there is a rule of law, and the constitution is giving you certain rights. And if you have been like like if somebody is giving such kind of farman or instruction, in that case you can go to the Supreme Court कि my fundamental rights are being violated and I want to appeal to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would definitely come out to protect your rights and you as well. Correct? So basically the rule of law is the indicator of modernity. What else? Let's see the economy. In economy also you can find a different kind of system. Earlier there was no linkage between the polity and economy. So the economy was very much free from the political control. But then there was a period coming where the economy is coming under strict control of polity. Why? Because the political powers believed that the economic control of the ruling powers can make them prosperous, and that's the reason because of what now that kind of control was being established. When you see the medieval period, you must have heard of these kind of things, that Akbar or Jahangir or Shahjahan had never had interest in the the trade and commerce and all these kind of things. If it is going on, fair enough. They were taking collecting some amount of money also in form of levy, they were levying some sort of taxes also, but they were never trying to regulate it, except few conditions or except few cases. Where there were certain examples we do have where they have tried to basically regulate it, but not always. That you need to keep in mind. But the moment it comes to modern, I think you all know there's one policy which is called as mercantilism. Correct? And what is mercantilism? Where state is intervening in the economic activities, that is mercantilism, nothing else. Correct? Na? So basically when the state intervene, state intervene in economy, that becomes the indicator of modernity. Okay? Third, now it comes to society. Sorry. Whether the society is rational or not, that is again one of the parameters. Now how come you can decide the rationality of the society? If the society is going for certain such practices which are completely illogical and irrational, in that case you cannot consider this society as a modern society. Such as if any society is practicing sati, correct? Can you consider this society as a rational society? I always used to say one thing, if sati is a valid thing, in that case the sata must be there in practice. You can justify sati if sata was there in the practice. अगर हस्बैंड के मरने के बाद महिलाएं मर रही हैं, वाइफ जो है वो सुसाइड कर रही हैं, तो फिर महिलाओं के औरतों के मरने के बाद जो उनके हस्बैंड्स को भी सुसाइड कर लेना चाहिए या चिता में जल जाना चाहिए. इट वाज नॉट देयर. So it means that it was a highly irrational practice which was there. After the death of husband, either you are becoming widow or sati. And what is the logic of becoming the widow? सफेद साड़ी पहनना है, बाल हटा लेने हैं, अच्छा खाना नहीं खाना है. इसका कोई rational interpretation हो सकता है क्या? Is there any rational interpretation of this? No, of course not. So basically when society is having these kind of practices or society is following these kind of things, in that case we must call it a irrational society. And if these kind of things are being challenged, that becomes the indicator of a rational society or a modern society. Correct? And fourth, I'll say, is about basically religion. Now, what I personally believe, that if the religion is dominant, the society cannot ever become rational. Correct? Huh? मैंने अगर ये कहा, ठीक है, कि I was just coming to the class, I was getting late for the class, but I entered into the class and I said, कि sorry यार, I got late for the class, but क्या करूँ, in the रास्ता, while coming to the class, I met with that Bajrang Wali, which is there, no, near Karol Bagh, झंडे वाला. And I was just crossing, suddenly Bajrangbali came out and he started saying कि कहाँ जा रहे हो? I just asked him कि नहीं मैं मुझे जाने दो, मुझे क्लास जाना है और बच्चे वेट करें. बोले नहीं just wait for some time, like actually I need to discuss about their future only. You have to wait here. And I then it is very important. Let's wait and discuss about it. So we started discussing about the career of all you individuals. And I came to the class and I told you this story. That this is what happened to me. And I too got very clear, who out of you are going to clear this UPSC? Will you accept this logic? No, no. He'll accept it. तो फिर आपकी सही जगह ये नहीं है. फिर तो एमपी में देखो यार, कौन सी जगह है वो? हाँ, बागेश्वर. हाँ, एग्जैक्ट वहां है, या इधर जहां अभी हाथरस तो चले, हरिद्वार चले जाओ यार. सबसे बेस्ट और सबसे बेस्ट करियर ऑप्शन है. थोड़ा स्ट्रगल है, थोड़ा इससे ज्यादा स्ट्रगल है, बट इट इज द बेस्ट करियर ऑप्शन. इफ यू हैव सेट योर करियर इन दैट फील्ड, नॉट ओनली यू, कई पूछते आपकी जो है बैठ के खाएंगे, बसरते प्रोवाइडेड. वो प्लान भी है, लेकिन स्ट्रगल बहुत ज्यादा है उसमें. कंपटीशन बहुत बढ़ गया है ना, कंपटीशन बहुत बढ़ गया. और दूसरा खतरा भी रहता है उधर, राम रहीम वाला खतरा भी रहता है ना. ठीक है, तो बी केयरफुल. हाँ, बहुत टाइम लगता है. वो बागेश्वर बाबा की तरह कोई थोड़े ना इतना यंग एज में जो है इतना पॉपुलर हो जाता है. पर्चा वो स्टाइल ले लिया उसने, अब आपको डिजिटल कुछ बनाना पड़ेगा. करेक्ट. What I was trying to tell you, if the society is very religious, in that case it cannot become rational. Society is more religious when religion is there in the public domain. Correct? When religion is there in the public domain, what do I mean by that? If religion is having its control over many things, polity, economy and other things, in that case the society would be definitely irrational. But if religion is moving from the public domain to private domain, that is another indicator of modernity. Now nobody is going to ask you this question ideally कि मंदिर जाते हो? कोई पूछता है आपसे? नहीं पूछता. I used to be with one of my friend for many years, for roughly 10 years. He never used to go to his institution, मतलब shrine. And in 10 years, I never asked a single time, why didn't you go to your religious shrine? That was his choice. Okay. He never asked whether, why am I going to the temples? Okay. So basically what happens, whenever the religion is the public-private domain, it is your own religion, and how do you follow your religion, that is completely depending up to you. That is the coming of religion into the private domain. So when religion is there in the public domain, it means that religion is going to intervene in your life. Rest you are samajdar, you can understand so many things. So it should be there in the private domain, not in the public domain. Now this is an indicator of modernity. So if we'll try to discuss about the modernity in a very rational way, this is the indicator of modernity. Correct? Now the question is that, if these are the indicators of modernity, do you really believe that the modernity in every part of the world must have entered or must have appeared in the same time? If it is about certain features, so it means it must not have appeared in all the parts of world in the same feature. Do you really believe that the tribals living in the Andaman and Nicobar, they have become modern in these days? Even right now also? No. Why? Because they are still leading that previous kind of life, and that's why they are not modern yet. We have become modern. Why? Because we are doing these kind of things, and that's how we became modern. So modernity is a very subjective concept which is appearing in different parts of world in different time period. So when you talk about the European context, in 16th century Europe entered into modernity. But when in 16th century Europe was having this modernity, or modernity was coming into the Europe, do you literally believe that even in India also the modernity started coming? No. Who was ruling in India at that point of time? It was Akbar. And Akbar was, of course, in the medieval period. So modernity is not necessarily coming to all the places of the world in the same time, because Africa became modern much more later. So basically it's a very subjective thing. We are not going to discuss about the world history right now. Of course we'll start world history and then we'll discuss about this. And I'll start with this point only, that how come modernity is coming to Europe. Undoubtedly modernity came to Europe slightly earlier. I can say 100-150 years ago than India at least. And before that there was no difference between India and Europe. The only thing where the Europeans took the lead is that modernity which entered into Europe slightly early. वो जो 200 साल पहले मॉडर्निटी वहां पे आ गए ना, उसकी वजह से उनका लाइफ हमसे बहुत बेहतर हो गया. हम वी आर रफली अराउंड 200 years behind than the Europeans. Why? Because they got this modernity much earlier, and that's from modernity to post modernity, and now they are in a reverse cycle. They are coming to India and going to any Baba in Uttarakhand चुपके ठीक है, नीम करौली के पास जा रहे, कोई कहीं जा रहे, ठीक है. अब उनका रिवर्स प्रोसेस शुरू हो गया. क्यों? वो लोग मटेरियलिज्म के चरम पे पहुंच गए थे. दे रीच टू द एपेक्स ऑफ मटेरियलिज्म एंड नाउ दे आर मूविंग बैक टुवर्ड्स द स्पिरिचुअलिज्म. बट व्हेन वी आर क्लेमिंग फ्रॉम इंडिया दैट वी आर ऑलरेडी वेरी स्पिरिचुअल, ये धोखा है. Basically, once you reach to that materialism and you realize कि no, there is a significance of spiritualism, and then when you come back, that is the real spiritualism. Either since beginning or highly spiritual, then there is a very different thing. अब हम गए तो अंगूर तोड़ने के लिए गए थे, अंगूर मिले नहीं तो हमने बोल दिया कि अंगूर खट्टे हैं. फर्क है ना दोनों में. और हमने अंगूर तोड़ के खाया और जब खट्टे मिले तो फिर हम बोलेंगे यार सच में अंगूर खट्टे थे. दोनों में बहुत फर्क है. So basically Europe entered into modernity slightly early, but when it comes to India, when did this modernity come in India? कब आई? Sorry? By the arrival of British. By the English? अरे speak, there's no problem. किस टाइम पे? Colonization था. After? Western education. Correct. और कुछ? Anybody else want to say? किसके बाद? ब्रिटिशर्स के बाद आए. ठीक है. ब्रिटिशर्स कब आए थे? 1605. 1605 नहीं, 1605 में तो ब्रिटिशर्स आ गए थे. नहीं था. 18th century. कैसे? Look, whenever this question is being asked, like people are always getting confused. Even the scholars are also not very much perfect about deciding the coming of this modernity in India. If we'll read one of the great scholars of modern India, Bipin Chandra, then according to him the modernity started with Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Correct? Why? Because Raja Ram Mohan Roy was the first person who started talking in terms of or in the line of rationalism. He questioned over the practices of sati. Why? Because he said it is highly irrational and that's why it should not be practiced. Correct, na? Or Ishwar Vidyasagar, who is questioning over this widowhood and all. So that's why he considers that with the coming of the social reformation movement, India enters into the modern period. But when it comes to Sumit Sarkar, according to him, the formation of Congress is the point from where the modernity starts in India, because for the first time any political party, modern political party was being set up in India, and that's how it is the indicator of modernity. According to him, I'm not saying whether he is right or wrong. And I have already told you that in history nobody is right and nobody is wrong. That's a very wrong perception. This is his own view. When he'll read Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, he'll find that he writes that actually the middle of 18th century is the period from that particular point you can find that India started entering into the modern period. So there are very subject. There are some people, they say 1857 is the beginning of modernity. Some people say with the death of Aurangzeb the modernity started. But then these are very irrational definitions of modernity, I must say. Why? Because modernity you cannot see in this way. Last night you slept in the medieval period and this night this morning you wake up in modern period. तो वैसे ही हो जाती थी. जब हम बच्चे थे तो हम एक साल पुरानी रोटी रख के अगले साल खाते थे, कहते थे कि एक साल पुरानी रोटी खा रहे हैं, बड़ा खुश होते थे. And modernity is a change in the society which cannot come overnight, and that's how it's a wrong way of expressing this idea. Modernity is such a phenomena which even cannot come in one day also. So since these kind of things are true, and that's why you should keep in mind one thing, that modernity cannot come in one day. So let us try to understand the entry of modernity in India in context of what? With respect to basically the various features what I discussed in the last slide, I'm going to talk about them. What is the first, thing that I told you? Rule of law. Now, how did this rule of law is coming? Somebody was, I guess, discussing about it, regulating act. Correct, no? Now, regulating act is definitely not a constitution. But then definitely you have to accept one point that this is the beginning of the constitution. Because if I'll say that ultimately this 1773 act, regulating act, was becoming bigger, and finally it's taking the shape of Indian constitution. Correct, na? So it is the beginning. Before that, have you seen that Aurangzeb or Akbar had been ever following any as such set of rules, and they were making the decision as per those set of rules? No. So they are at least getting a set of set of rules, and they tried to rule over India as per those rules or the systems. Correct. So that's why we can say ki the rule of law. So all these acts, not necessarily only the regulating act, okay? Only the regulating act, maybe regulating act, then the Pitts India Act 1784, then the Charter Acts 1793, 1813, 1833. All these acts are basically gradually bringing that notion in India that India has to be governed. India has to be also governed with the help of some set of rules and regulation. That is how in India for the first time this concept is coming, and the concept of what? The concept of rule of law. Correct? Then what is the second parameter I told you? Economy. Now I have already told you that in the medieval times, actually the Indian rulers were least concerned about the economy. They were only bothering about agriculture. Why? Because it was a major source of their income, and they were collecting the revenue. Trade, commerce, market, they were least concerned. They had been collecting some amount of tax, but then this was very less, as compared to agriculture. But after the entry of what? After the entry of, the colonial people, specifically, I can say after the Battle of Plassey, since they became political powers, and now by using their political powers, they have started manipulating what? The economy. They have started taking undue advantages. Right. So basically Indian economy was coming under the control of the Europeans. That is also one phenomenon. Moving next, society. I think just now I had been discussing, yes, from the period of Rajaram Mohan Roy, or let's say being more general, we can say the social reform movement is marking the beginning of a rational society in India. They started questioning over caste system, sati practices, the widowhood, and so on. So they have been questioning. Why? Because they simply wanted to know one thing, simply wanted to question or basically the all irrational practices in India, and that's how we can say about this. Okay? And along with this, changes what we see in the society, now we can find that religion, which used to be so prominent in India, now it is also moving to the private domain, because now a secular government, or the concept of secular government is coming, where the state had nothing to do with the religion. Correct? And in fact, the company which became the political master of India, for a very long period of time, it wanted to keep, it wanted to avoid any sort of affiliation with the religion or Christianity. Why? Because they knew that the moment they are coming closer to Christianity, or they are promoting Christianity, in that case, it is quite possible that the Indian people would be disappointed, and that's how they wanted to keep the religion completely separated or isolated from them. But unfortunately, it could not happen. But then the concept of secularism is coming in India, and then here always the religion is getting into the private domain. So, is this one period in which it is happening, or it's a larger span in which you can find that these features are coming? It's a larger span, right? So, what would be the conclusion that how do we find the entry of modernity in India? So, we can say that from the mid of 18th century, the modernity in India, right? So we can say from mid of 18th century to mid of 19th century. So we can say that in this particular period, India gradually started entering into which period? The modern period. Correct. India gradually started entering into which period? The modern period. Correct. अब ऐसा भी नहीं कि in the mid of 19th century that process got completed. Is it correct to say? Does it even sound also correct? No. Like maybe there are so many people, they are still not they are still not very much influenced by the modern ideas. In India, there are so many people yet supporting the caste system and all these kind of things. In that case, can you call them modern? No, no. So of course it's a process, maybe it is still going on. But roughly we believe that this is the period of the transition where India was gradually transforming into the modern period. So now we can say that from the from the middle of 18th century, we can say that yes, India gradually started getting into the modern period, and that's how we study the modern Indian history from the middle of 18th century, or roughly speaking, what century? 18th century. Earlier, the modern period started from the 19th century, right? If you want to understand it with respect to, some other example, if you read the book of Bipin Chandra, you can find the first topic is the 1857 rebellion. It starts from the peasant rebellion and all. Okay? Why? Because according to him, this is how the modernity starts, or the social reformation movement. Like from there only the book starts. If you read the book of Satish Chandra, it starts from the post 1857 period only, with the formation of Congress. But because people had different perception. But if you read the book of Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, in that case, this book is starting with the 18th century. Why 18th century? Because in fact, its impact could be noticed even on your syllabus also. Like, have you seen ever the GS syllabus? Like, if you see the GS syllabus, it is written modern India, and then further it is written from the middle of 18th century. So why did they feel this need to write it precisely, or specifically that from the middle of 18th century, that they believe that while reading the modern India, you are not avoiding what? The history of 18th century. That becomes part of modern India. So this is how, we should also start our modern India with the 18th century. But then being very specific or precise, I must say, that when it comes to 18th century, nowadays more questions are being asked in 18th century in which part? From 18th century in which part? Medieval. But it is quite possible that from medieval, from 18th century they can ask question even in the modern also. So we are going to start with this 18th century, that we can even link also with the medieval and the modern. So we are going to begin with the first topic, that is the topic of 18th century. Correct? So the first topic is 18th century. So let's begin with this 18th century then, right? Okay, fine. So when it comes to 18th century, now 18th century is a very specific period with respect to Indian history, right? What are the things which are making it very specific? So there is one term that has been used for 18th century as dark age of Indian history, right? And before 18th century, there is something that you have to understand. What happens here, as you must have been noticed, that Mughals were there in India, correct? And the last ruler, not last ruler, but the last important ruler, that was Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb. And his death is happening in which year? 1707. And Aurangzeb's death was followed by many other Mughal rulers. So such as immediately after Aurangzeb, who is coming? Bahadur Shah first is coming. Then he was followed by Jahandar Shah. Then Farrukh Siyar. Then after Farrukh Siyar, you can find Rafiud-Dawla, Rafiud-Darjat, and then you find Muhammad Shah Rangila, right? So on. So within 1707 to 1750, you can find 1748. Because so many rulers are coming. And in fact, nobody was so much, nobody was very capable. So everybody, every ruler except few, they were very weak. And in fact, this was the period when you can find that, the Mughal officials, they became very powerful, right? There were so many Mughal officials, they started enjoying much power, such as you might have heard of, the kingmakers, the Sayyid brothers, right? So Sayyid brother is there, and some other people were there. They were like, Nizam al Mulk is there, Asaf Jah, like, that person who like further became the Nawab of Hyderabad, okay, Nizam of Hyderabad. So that's how we can find that this, like, Mughal Empire had started going through this particular situation. Okay, correct. On the other hand, like, you can find that the European powers have entered into India. They have already entered into India. So when it comes to the European powers, like, you know about Portuguese, okay, like initially they are coming, then they were followed by the Dutch people, okay, then English are coming, then the Danish people are coming, and finally the French people are coming. So they have already entered in 17th century, but till 17th century, they were merely acting as a trading hub, as a trading entity, right? But the moment it comes to 18th century, now they became very, ambitious, and couple of them started trying to, like, convert themselves into political power also. So that is another thing which is happening. So ultimately what we can say, when it comes to 18th century, like 18th century is known for multiple phenomena. Okay? So if we'll talk about, like, 18th century, in that case, we can understand it in this way, ki 18th century, for our better understanding, like, can be divided into two parts. 18th century can be divided into two parts. Like, this is the first half of 18th century, and this is the second half of 18th century. If we'll see in terms of time, in that case, let's keep it in 1707 to 1757, right? And when it comes to this part, here we can keep 1757 to 1803. This is the time period. And in both the time periods, there are certain important changes or transformations are there. What are two important changes that we notice in the first half? First is the decline of Mughals, and then we find many regional powers. And when you see this part, here you can find, like, I can say one thing, the colonization of India. So when you see 18th century, in a very, crude way, these are some important developments that could be noticed. Correct? 1707, Aurangzeb died. 1757, Battle of Plassey took place. That facilitated the English East India Company to become the political master in India. And 1803 is the period, is the year when Delhi was coming under the control of British East India Company. And once Delhi came under their control, so we believe that this is the end of an era, because now the center of the Mughal power came under the control of English, and that's how, like, we believe this transition got completed. So from 1803 onwards, we can say India was fully colonized. Correct? So these are, like, a few important things. Okay, fine. Now when it comes to, like, the decline of Mughals, I'm not getting into that particular reason right now, that what happened as such because of what the decline, Mughals decline. But partially we can see it. Let's say if you are talking about the Mughal decline, ये हम medieval में cover करेंगे, ठीक? Mughal decline. So though the Mughals continued till 1857, because Mughals were formally removed from the power in 1857 after the 1857 after the, like, revolt of 1857. But there is no meaning of the presence of Mughals. ठीक है, वो है नहीं है, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. It is said for Bahadur Shah Zafar that hardly matters that Bahadur Shah Zafar was present, because he was, like, enjoying the power as a Mughal emperor only within the Lal Killa, Red Fort, not outside of that. Even कहते हैं कि चांदनी चौक वाले मार्केट में भी उनका कंट्रोल नहीं था. ठीक है, so he had lost his control. So we can say कि the Mughals to some extent surviving till Muhammad Shah Rangila, that is 1748. But 1748 or, like, 1739, when that person is invading India, who was he? Nadir Shah. When Nadir Shah invaded India, so whatsoever remaining powers were there with the Mughals, that also got finished. And after that, like, there was no meaning of the presence of Mughals at all in India, and that's how we talk about the Mughal decline. Now, why did the Mughal decline? There might be so many things. Okay? So, as it is being, like, seen in history very popularly, that if any empire is declining, there might be so many reasons behind it. So, such as there's a very popular reason, like, weak successors. So it is believed that Aurangzeb was very powerful, but his successors were not that powerful, and that's how the Mughals declined. There are so many people listing other reasons, like somebody is blaming Aurangzeb for the decline of the Mughal Empire. It is said by Jadunath Sarkar that the religious policies of Aurangzeb were really disastrous for Mughal Empire, and finally what happened? The Mughals are losing their power because his attitude towards Hindus, his attitude towards the Rajputas, the way he was breaking or destroying so many temples, like it was considered to be a sort of reason for the Mughal decline. But later, when the serious researches were done, in that case, historians came up with very different kind of reasons for the Mughal decline, such as Satish Chandra is talking about the very popular Jagirdari crisis for Mughal decline. And then when it comes to Irfan Habib, he talks about the agrarian crisis for the decline of Mughal Empire. So it's a very historical debate. Different historians do talk about different kind of reasons for the Mughal decline. Somebody even says that the Deccan policy of Aurangzeb was another reason for the Mughal decline. So that's how they have discussed about the Mughal Empire, right? But then since the Mughals are declining, and that's how the Mughals do not remain very important for us in 18th century, because it is just the matter of time that they had been losing their power, right? That is followed by another great development, that is about the emergence of regional powers, right? Now when it comes to regional powers, there is a great scholar called as C.A. Bailey. C.A. Bailey. C.A. Bailey. Now C.A. Bailey divides all these regional powers in 3 different categories. And what are these 3 different categories? According to him, there is one category which is called as the successor state. The second category is rebellious states, and the third category is autonomous states, right? These are 3 categories in which they were divided. When it comes to the successor states, what are the states falling in this category? And Awadh. Okay. There are 3 examples for this: Awadh, Bengal, Hyderabad, and then yes, we can even keep कर्नाटक also रख सकते हैं. हालांकि सीए बेली ने नहीं रखा था, सीए बेली ने बस इन 3 को रखा है, ठीक है. बट कर्नाटक भी उनके डेफिनेशन में आता है. एक्चुअली कर्नाटक वाज नॉट टोटली सेपरेटेड फ्रॉम हैदराबाद, एंड दैट्स हाउ समटाइम्स वी रिजेक्ट द इंडिपेंडेंट एग्जिस्टेंस ऑफ कर्नाटक. करेक्ट. Who all were these successor states? Factually they are. Why are they being called as successor states? That is a very important question.
Because their governors came from the Mughal system.
Correct.
They were basically province of the Mughal Empire.
Correct. Or fine.
They were succeeding the Mughal system also.
Like why they are being called as successor states? Couple of reasons are there. First, their emergence could be noticed in Mughal territory only. Bengal was part of Mughal territory. Awadh was part of Mughal territory. And Hyderabad as well was part of Mughal territory. Hyderabad, when the Mughals have annexed Deccan, so Hyderabad used to be an important base for it, right? So that is one important reason. Second reason, the most important reason, that they never outrightly challenged, right, the Mughals. Never. Challenged the Mughals, या फिर आप ऐसे लिख सकते, they never challenge the Mughal sovereignty. They never challenged the Mughal sovereignty. Now what is the meaning of this? They still continued calling the Mughals as the Badshah, and they used to call themselves as Nawab. So they never claimed that legitimacy, that sovereignty, that we can literally call them as sovereign powers. Now whatsoever symbolic symbolic presentation were there, or whatsoever symbolic things were there through which they could have conveyed this idea that they are still considering the Mughals as the sovereign power, they continued. Such as they kept on reading the khutbah in the name of Mughals. What is khutbah? It's a Friday namaz offered by any administrator. So if any administrator starts reading the khutbah in his own name, it means that he has declared himself as a sovereign power. So they kept on reading the khutbah in the name of Mughal power, or Mughal Badshah. Second, they had been minting the coins yet with the name of Mughal emperor. So these are, and in fact the most important thing I'm missing, they continued paying tribute to the Mughal emperors. So there are three reasons because of what we can say that they continued this Mughal legacy, or they accepted the suzerainty of the Mughals. Correct? But if they are accepting the suzerainty of the Mughals, in that case, how come we can say that these people were these people were independent power, or these regions were independent power? We can talk about some other things through which we can literally prove that these people were independent powers, such as whatsoever symbolic ideas were there, they were accepting the Mughal suzerainty, or they were accepting the Mughals as the sovereign. But when it comes to enjoying the real powers, they were literally enjoying as real powers. Such as whenever they had been going for war, they were never taking the permission from the Mughals. First they went for the war. And after the war, if they had been signing any treaty with the other power, they were signing the treaties without asking the Mughals. After signing it, they were getting it signed by the Mughals. मतलब वो प्रेसिडेंट वाली हालत है, सिग्नेचर तो करना पड़ेगा आपको. मुगल्स को भी कोई पंगा नहीं चाहिए था, ठीक है यार कर देंगे, कर देते थे वो, राइट. So basically, that is one thing. And the most important thing, when it comes to the distribution of revenue, Mughals had a claim over the whole revenue, but they are not giving the whole revenue. They are just giving one share of the revenue, which can be called as a tribute, which must not be called as tax, right? So there is a difference between tax and tribute. When any power is collecting tax, it means that he is the whole and sole authority over that region. When somebody is collecting only tribute, it means that he is not enjoying the ultimate sovereignty in that particular part. So basically they were paying tribute, not ever the taxes. Or tribute कोई fixed income नहीं होता. It is like total revenue is 1 lakh rupees, that the tribute would be 10,000. Whatever that ruler is willing to give to Mughal emperor, they were also happily accepting it. और उनके पास they were never having any other option also. Why? Because the tribute being paid by Awadh, Hyderabad and Bengal were the only sources of income of the Mughal rulers. And that's how they were happily accepting it, because they were leading the life of a Badshah because of this tribute what they had been getting from here, right? So we can say yet they are independent for this reason. But apart from this, when it comes to successor states, there is another thing that you need to keep in mind, which is very important, that as far as the administration is concerned, now the Mughal legacy could be noticed even in their administration also. The Mughal legacy could be noticed even in administration also. So the kind of Mughal administration they had, Mughals had, the same administrative system could be noticed even with these successor powers also. Even the name of the post, the culture of the court were very similar, and this is the reason because of what we say it was very similar. So these are the reasons because of what we call them successor states, because they were a bit different from rest of the states. Okay. Then it comes to the second state, that is called as rebellious states. I think it's very simple. So those who raised their voice against the Mughals, they fought against the Mughals, and that's how they got an independent existence. They are called as rebellious states. And who all are the best example for this? Marathas are the best example. After the Marathas, we can talk about the Sikhs. They were undoubtedly challenged the Mughal power. Then yes, we can talk about the Jats. Then we can talk about Pathans. So ये सारे किसके example हैं? They are the example of basically the rebellious powers. So they rebelled against the Mughals, and that's how they got an independent identity. This is another example. Rajputas will come in the autonomous states. I'll come to that point. Any doubt? Yeah, exactly. Farrukhabad or Ruhelkhand ke Pathans. ठीक है? Those who somehow managed to establish some independent states. Farrukhabad and Ruhelkhand. What happened, Vineet? Why are you smiling? Pathans were? Brothers. Bengal. No. Bengal. They were there like in Farrukhabad in UP and Ruhelkhand in UP, right? So they were there in Bundelkhand and then this region, Farrukhabad region, UP only, right? So the Pathans also established their independent rule, right? These are rebellious powers. So they fought, they revolted against the Mughals, and they are coming into existence, right? But here I would like to draw your attention towards something, right? Though they rebelled against the Mughals, that's how they came into independent existence. But did they challenge the Mughal sovereignty altogether? No. They also to some extent accepted the Mughals as the sovereign power of this country. And the best example of this I can give you through the Marathas. Whenever the Marathas had been collecting the Chauth and Sardeshmukhi from different parts of India, now they were getting it approved from Mughal Emperor. हाँ या ना? पढ़ाई नहीं. How many of you are here after reading? Have you all collected the material? नहीं. क्यों? कर लो यार. यहीं से हो जाएगा. यहीं से. You can collect it from here. Develop this habit of coming to the class at least after reading the NCERT book. कुछ नहीं पढ़ो तो कम से कम NCERT की किताब पढ़ के क्लास में. Correct? So you all have to read that modern NCERT of R.S. Sharma, Bipin Chandra, the old one. Correct? So from here, you all will come to the class after reading that chapter. So since we have started 18th century, you'll come to the class after reading 18th century. And that's how you'll be able to understand the things in a better way. आप इस ईगो में मत रहना कि अच्छा अब मैं ग्रेजुएशन पास करने के बाद मैं एनसीईआरटी पढ़ूंगा. हर कोई पढ़ रहा है, मैं भी पढ़ रहा, तो आप भी पढ़ लीजिए. कोई इसमें ईगो वाली बात नहीं. सलमान खान बनने की जरूरत नहीं है ना. पढ़ के आइए. Yes, I was just discussing that point. They were collecting the Chauth and Sardeshmukhi with the permission of Mughal. And in fact, this is the reason because of what, it is being said to some extent, they were also accepting the Mughal sovereignty. It was much lesser than the successor states. They were not paying any tribute. So that's how we can say that they were to some extent they were accepting the Mughal authority. And then finally it comes to the autonomous states. Now what is this autonomous states? Those who are never under any power. Okay? Specifically Mughal power. So what would be the ideal example of this autonomous states? उससे भी ideal example? कश्मीर में तो कंट्रोल था. Yeah, exactly. Ahom kingdom. ठीक है. The best example for this is Ahom kingdom. The second best example for this is Mysore, which was never under the control of the Mughals. ठीक है. And then we can even keep the Rajputas here. The Rajputas here. Cholas. The Cholas were not existing in the 18th century, na? They were very old. आप लोगों को बहुत जरूरी है कि थोड़ा आप लोग पढ़ के आए क्लास में. 13th century, correct. Cholas were in the medieval times. ठीक है. So these are the autonomous states. So these were three regional powers. And why am I discussing about three regional powers? Because ultimately when it comes to the next phase, now this is the first phase, right? And then when it comes to, when it comes to the second half, right? The second half of 18th century, second half of 18th century. Now here, as I did tell you, what do you see? You see the process of colonization. Correct? And when it comes to colonization, ultimately this colonization was done by the British East India Company. By defeating whom? By defeating these regional powers. Correct, na? By defeating these regional powers. One by one, they defeated all these regional powers. And I think you must be having like, agar yaad hai to, theek hai. So when it comes to Battle of Palasi, that was fought against Bengal. When it comes to Battle of Buxar, that was fought against Awadh. Precisely Awadh. theek hai. When it comes to the Carnatic wars, they were fought against Hyderabad and Karnataka. When it comes to Anglo-Mysore wars, of course, Anglo-Maratha wars, Anglo-Sikh wars, and that's how that process was completed. So from 1740s, that process of colonization of India had started, and this process continued till 1857. So though most of the important areas were annexed by the company till 1818 only, Marathas were last, I can say, or yes, Sikh le lete hum 1848, when the last power was removed, and then doctrine of lapse and other things, that's how India got annexed. So basically in the second half, the process of colonization started, though it was not completed, but we can say it started. And in fact on 1803, the English East India Company had a tie-up with the Marathas, because Delhi was under the control of Scindias, and Scindia signed a treaty with British East India Company, and that's how indirectly the English East India Company started exercising its control over Delhi. And the way they controlled Delhi, or the moment they started controlling Delhi, that is considered to be a sort of end of a era, and we say that now greater part of India got colonized. This is the story what we study here, right? So now there are two things I told you for 18th century. One, these kind of development, and the second, the the ideological concepts for 18th century, the way it's being called as Dark Age. So this is how we have to understand this 18th century, right? So now how we are going to begin? Either we can go first for the philosophical debates or the historiographical debates for 18th century, and then we'll come to these developments, or else we can finish this and we can go to the historiographical debate. तो अब लेकिन मैं आपसे बोलूँगा कि you guys come to the class tomorrow after reading that 18th century वाला topic from the book of Bipin Chandra. Correct? So you come after reading, because we're not going to study the stories here. एक मुर्शिद कुली खां है, ठीक है, फिर अली वर्दी खान आ जाता है, ये सब पढ़ के आइए आप लोग थोड़ा सा, तो चीज़ें ठीक होंगी हमारे लिए. So 18th century finished from the book of Bipin Chandra, and tomorrow we'll go for this kind of things. Okay? Any doubt, question, query? Nothing? So let's meet tomorrow, same time, 3:35. Okay. Thank you all.